Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we are looking at Kastral the Windcrested as a bird tribal commander. Kastral the Windcrested is a 5 mana white and blue bird scout. It's a 4/5 flyer and it says whenever one or more birds you control deal combat damage to a player, choose one. You may put a bird creature card from your graveyard or hand onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it, put a +1/+1 counter on each bird you control, or draw a card. And as usual, the 1 or more damage to a player action in EDH applies to each player separately, so you can potentially get in a 4-player pod 3 different triggers off of Kastral, either triple drawing, triple pumping, or doing a combination of any of those abilities. Now obviously, since we're the bird tribal deck, we want to play a lot of birds, and that's naturally going to lead us to a beatdown strategy, both with wanting to have lots of creatures on the battlefield and with wanting to trigger Kastral itself. So just to quickly get everything that's a bird out of the way, we have Aerial Extortionist, a 5 mana 4/3 flyer. When it enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, exile up to one target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may cast it. So it either allows you to exile your own thing and recast it for value, or exile an opponent's thing and make them have to pay for it again. This, of course, can obviously be used to get stacks pieces out of the way, or just do anything that you need to get out of the way temporarily. It also says whenever another player casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. So you'll not only draw a card from the player casting the spell from somewhere other than hand, obviously from exiling via Aerial Extortionist, but this can also allow you to draw cards from any other such actions. For example, a player casting spells off of Underworld Breach. Next up, we have some small birds that are mostly used just as beaters that have some random filtering abilities. So Artificer's Assistant is a 1 mana 1/1 that whenever you cast a historic spell, scry 1. Augrial is a 2 mana 1/1 that when it enters, you scry 3. Judge's Familiar, which can be used as a cheap taxing effect. Imperial Eagle as our one lord. Some cost reduction birds in Stormscape Familiar, which reduces the cost of our white spells. And Warden of Evos Isle and Watcher of the Spheres as cards that reduce the cost of our flyers. Eagles of the North, which most of the time is going to be used just to plane cycle for a land, but it is later on a bigger bird that pumps the team. Cartographer's Hawk, a 2 mana 2/1 flyer that when it deals combat damage to a player who controls more lands than you, return it to its owner's hand, and if you do, you may search your library for planes and put it onto the battlefield tapped. So sometimes a ramp spell. Keeper of the Nine Gales, a 3 mana 1/2 flyer that says tap, and then tap 2 other untapped birds you control, return target permanent to its owner's hand. Mockingbird, which is a clone that is a bird regardless of what it clones. Nimble Obstructionist, our bird stifle. Aven Interrupter, which comes down and when it enters exile target spell, it becomes plotted, and spells your opponents cast from graveyards or from exile cost 2 more to cast. So similarly to Aerial Extortionist, the Aven Interrupter not only taxes the thing it itself exiles, but taxes other things, example Underworld Breach again. And then after all of that, the few birds in the deck that are actually good, and not just birds because we're bird tribal, so things like Aven Mind Sensor, Ledger Shredder, and Essior Wardwing Familiar. Spells your opponents cast that target 1 or more commanders you control cost 3 more to cast, so it is important that once Kastral's on the field, it doesn't just die. And then the last bird, Crookclaw Elder, 6 mana 3/2 flyer. Tap 2 untapped birds you control, draw a card, or tap 2 untapped wizards you control, target creature gains flying. That last part doesn't really matter. The card is expensive, but it does allow you to draw cards via your birds. So as you can probably tell based on this breakdown of the various creatures we're playing, the bird deck is struggling the most at the moment, and it's currently August 2024 when I'm recording this video, by the fact that there just aren't that many good birds in EDH. But of course, the amount of creatures that get printed, with some of those being birds, will only increase over time, so replace or add on to the bird count as needed as more sets are released. Outside of the various birds, we of course have the usual suspects in the list. So for tribal, we have Coat of Arms to make our birds much, much bigger. In the card draw category, we have the usual suspects like the One Ring, but we also have lots of beatdown related draw spells like Bident of Thassa, Coastal Piracy, Kindred Discovery, Grazilax, Reconnaissance Mission, and the Indomitable, which are all various flavors of hit your opponents with birds, draw cards. Winged Words is over here as well as basically a 2 mana draw 2. Roaming Throne is another thing that will double up the triggers on Kastral amongst our other birds. A nice counterspell suite. We are in blue after all. Lightning Greaves to both protect Kastral and allow Kastral to attack immediately, along with Jeweled Lotus so that we can play Kastral and hold mana up. Fairly stock standard blue-white lands for our deck. Little bit of protection. Specifically in this case, cards that I don't normally play, but which I'll include here, are Galadriel's Dismissal and Teferi's Protection as way of safeguarding our large board of birds from sweepers. A whole bunch of ramp spells. Obviously, our deck works better when Kastral's in play, so we want to get that out. A little bit of removal and bounce spells. We've got some stacks pieces, which aside from Maven Mind Censor, Drannith Magistrate is always a good solid choice in white. Also Lavinia here. And in particular, the one standout card here is Dovescape. Now, Dovescape is usually a double-edged sword in that while it is shutting off all of your opponent's non-creatures, it's also shutting off yours. However, in Kastral, we can take advantage of the fact that we're getting a bunch of bird tokens because our bird tokens work better with our pump like Empyrean Eagle and, of course, Kastral's bird triggers. And then the rest, straightforward, Cyclonic Rift, Enlightened Mystical Tutor, and Urza's Saga. I also considered playing Airborne Aid and Distant Melody as ways of drawing cards based on the number of birds we control, but it felt like the other draw spells were just better than these, and we don't control that many birds, so while these are probably fine, I ultimately decided not to include them. And with that, that is going to be Kastral the Windcrested as Bird Tribal for EDH.